teenage sites, and suicidal thoughts. Have you also catered to these kids?
It's very, very common. It is the second most common reason now. Sometimes teenagers say, I wish I don't wake up tomorrow morning. Or I wish a bus runs over me. I won't do anything to myself, but I wish, I would be. He's like, do you know how AI is progressing? What guarantee that my job won't remain after 5 years? I won't get married, I won't have kids. I said, why? I mean, is there any trauma related to that? Do you think I can sustain in Mumbai buying a 2 BHK, having 2 kids? Do you know the cost of schools? This was a 20-year-old. Most teenagers would tell me I would want my mom or my dad to put down the phone or put down the laptop and talk to me. So listening to your child, especially when your child is talking about his or her emotions, is very important. So first listen without judging.
To what extent genes play a role in these disorders? Kids are facing problems because they are overprotected by parents.
Typical helicopter parenting, and Kajol had a movie some years back called Helicopter Ila.
मुझे नहीं चाहिए ये सफोकेशन, मुझे नहीं रहना है तुम्हारे साथ, मैं जा रहा हूँ।
गुस्से में कुछ नहीं बोल देगा।
गुस्से में तो सच ही बोल रहा हूँ ना।
Teenagers, I think, face too much struggle, and I keep thinking to myself, I think when I was a teenager, definitely the stress wasn't this high.
The way my child was 2 years back and the way he is today, there is I feel he's a different human altogether.
I obviously teenagers need their space.
Yeah,
they need their
they
privacy.
Need too much space. Today's podcast is very special, not just as a podcast host, but also as a mom to a teenager. Because today we are discussing the most important aspect, child psychology and everything kids go through without we parents even realizing. During today's podcast, I realized so many mistakes I was doing unknowingly while thinking I'm doing best for my child. And I'm sure while listening to the entire episode with most amazing Dr. Manjari Deshpande, you are going to realize subtle mistakes that even you are doing. So guys, this podcast is for everyone. So just sit back, relax and enjoy. Hey Dr. Manjari, welcome to the Amrita Kunal show. And thank you so very much for first of all taking out time and discussing and ready to discuss something so close to my heart.
Thank you so much, Amrita. It's a pleasure being here. It's a topic that's very close to my heart also.
Yes. So doctor, to start with, I first want to know, how did this journey becoming a doctor, becoming a child psychiatrist start for you?
So I always knew I wanted to become a doctor since my childhood. And, during our MBBS, we are exposed to all the fields probably. And that's where we fluctuate. Okay, for some time you want to be a physician, then a psychiatrist or a surgeon. You go through that phase. But somewhere during the final year and in just before PG, I knew I wanted to become a psychiatrist because talking to people was something that I always loved. And I think psychiatry was very challenging, where we have the least, diagnostic assessments or whatever, but you just speak and you understand what the person is going through. So maybe that part of me always wanted to speak to people, understand, and that made me a psychiatrist. And then while I was training in psychiatry, we realized there were a lot of kids also who needed help. This was in 2011-12. And a lot of children were also coming to our hospital where I was training. And then I realized, no, I don't want to do adult psychiatry because there is a lot of competition and a lot of people can become adult psychiatrists. But I think children also need to be looked into. And I always love being with kids, playing with kids, etc. So then probably I decided, yes, it's best that I become a child psychiatrist. So then did another fellowship and decided I will pursue only child psychiatry and, only look at children and teenagers.
Wow, that's amazing. So now, doctor, coming to child psychiatry, I wanted to know what are the early signs where you realize that, okay, kids are going through some sort of struggle? What are those symptoms?
So, in child psychiatry, we look at both neurodevelopmental illnesses, which are, illnesses from birth and in the early formative years, or the developmental illnesses. And we also look at psychological illness. So when you talk about neurodevelopmental illnesses, you must have heard of these terms: autism, ADHD, developmental delay. These begin extremely early. So our brain, like the 90% of our adult brain, develops in the first 5 years of life. So it's during those stages when, you know, the milestones are beginning to develop. We see a delay. The child is not holding his neck, the child cannot sit, the child cannot walk, the child doesn't understand response to his name call, or the child is not giving eye contact. So very, very early, before 1 year, around 1 year, we can see sometimes signs of autism, one of the most common neurodevelopmental illnesses. If you look at psychological illnesses, even at 3, 4, sometimes we see a lot of separation anxiety. Children are very distressed. The moment you put them into school, you know, they find it very difficult to adjust, or, you know, they're going through emotional difficulties. Tantrums are common in all children, but then when they are excess in nature, 4-year-old being extremely aggressive, extremely irritable to the point of physical aggression. So these signs can be picked up and seen quite early if they are severe. If they are milder, of course, you know, time goes by. We generally tend to keep waiting. You know, the child will speak, the child will outgrow this, etc. So it may take time. But sometimes we see them as early as between 1 to 5 years of age also.
So do you feel that the earlier they come, the better it gets for them as well as for you as a doctor?
Definitely. And early intervention goes a long way, whether it is neurodevelopmental illnesses or psychological illnesses, for both. Because again, coming back to that point, 90% brain develops in first 5 years. So at that time, you can consider the brain like a sponge. You know, it will absorb anything that you're trying to teach. So if the brain is growing in an atypical pathway, you want the brain to learn something new. We see young kids being very moldable. But you consider us as adults, when we want to change something in ourselves, you realize how difficult it is to outgrow one bad habit or to outgrow some nature you want to change. But children are very, very moldable and amenable. And in these disorders, the earlier we begin the process of therapy or medication or whatever the treatment is, the response is very, very good, and the response is much better. Sometimes, unfortunately, they come to us at very late stages where we unfortunately don't have any magic pill, magic wand, and we are also not able to do a lot of justice to the child. So in all these disorders, the earlier the child comes to us and the earlier the signs are picked up, it is much better for treatment.
Okay, and to what extent these illnesses, these disorders are resolvable? To what extent a child can live a normal life?
In most of these cases, yes. Again, we say, you know, in today's time, most parents ask this question, will my child be normal?
Yeah.
And generally, I tell them there's no definition of normal. How do you know I'm normal? How do you know you are normal? So we're all different, you know, it depends on what you are looking at. So we tell parents, okay, this is the baseline, this is the benchmark you've come today. We want the child to be better, or the child to be developing in a better way, or to learn some skills compared to when he or she came to us. So definitely with help, the child will be able to live a more independent and productive life. A lot of our disorders are not treatable. There is no cure. So definitely parents will ask us, will you treat my child's autism? Will you be able to cure this illness? Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have a cure to some of the neurodevelopmental or even psychiatric illnesses because they are pretty chronic. But yes, they can definitely still live very meaningful, independent lives if they have got treatment well in time.
So when you say they are not treatable, then what is the solution for such kind of illnesses, and which are those illnesses?
So in neurodevelopmental illness, there's no treatment, means there's no medication that I can give and cure everything, because there's no medication in some of these disorders. We do use medication for some of the problems associated with them. But yes, therapies help in skill building. So there is a deficit. So a child with autism cannot mix, cannot socialize, cannot speak. So it's a deficit in a skill that he has. So we can build those skills through therapies like occupational therapy, speech therapy, physiotherapy, special education. We can teach them these skills so that they can live meaningful, productive lives in the future.
Okay. So doctor, you are treating so many kids today. What, according to you, is this child's mental wellness mean to you?
So mental wellness, I would say, is a term that we say when, you know, we are living happy, productive lives, and most important, living life to the best of our own potential. So we are able to do what we want. We are able to be happy. Our sleep appetite is intact. You know, not just being free from an illness, but actually being well, you know, living a happy, stress-free life and doing something productive in life. I would say that's mental wellness. So for a child, it's not necessary achieving A+ or 90% grades, but doing well in his life, his or her life, and contributing to something in society, doing something with his own life. I would say that is mental wellness.
So, doctor, you have been treating so many patients, so many kids today. So what is the one silent emotional battle most of the kids go through, and how do you spot it first as a doctor?
I would say many a times our society overlooks emotions of children in general. When a child tells a parent, I'm feeling, say, upset, sad, anxious, many a times first few thing is, rub it off. There's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with you. Kindness alike. There's nothing wrong with you. Move on, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
That may be the sign that the child is trying to open up and speak up. So anxiety in children is common, especially in today's world when it's such a stimulated, highly competitive world. Emotions like anxiety, sadness, they often go not unnoticed, but they often are ignored. And that may be the root cause of suffering. So, yes, it's important that we pay attention when the child is trying to speak to us.
When we are talking about anxiety, what's the earliest age you have seen among kids,
So,
which has sometimes even surprised you actually?
definitely. I would say anxiety is very common in teenagers, definitely,
Yeah.
that we all know. But we also see anxiety in preschoolers and school going children. So, like I said, separation anxiety disorder. A child is not able to separate from his mother or his primary caregivers. And the child then has to go to school to the point where he's crying, not able to sit in school, not able to becoming excessively clingy to the mother. This is a disorder that we call as separation anxiety disorder. So even at 3 or 4, at times we may see anxiety in children. And yes, it may manifest in very different ways. Obviously, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old will not come and say I'm anxious, but it will be seen in their behavior, in their play, the way they are playing, the way they are sleeping, eating. All this will change because children cannot articulate their emotions very well. So the way they play and the way they are living their life, that is an indication for us as to what emotion he or she is going through.
Okay, but doctor, I want to ask one question as a parent. Now, most of the kids go through this separation anxiety when they start with the schooling. I remember my son used to cry even in senior KG also. He used to just cling on to me and he used to just start crying. So, what is that threshold that parents should understand that, okay, beyond this is not normal?
Sure, that's a very nice question, Amrita, because yes, separation anxiety is normal.
Yeah.
It is there and it will be there in all kids generally when they are first time separating from their parents. But you took some time. Your child probably took a couple of days, etc., and then he was very, very well settled. You had to push him, encourage him a little, mollycoddle him for some time, and then he was independent. Sometimes children don't outgrow this phase. So, there are days to weeks where the child is crying. He's becoming very clingy to the mother to the point when the mother is in the toilet, bathroom, standing at the door and, knocking constantly, not letting go of the hands and feet of the mother, not able to sleep, not able to eat properly, not able to engage in play. So, even if the mother is around, the play changes because they have this constant fear and constant anxiety that I'll be separated from my mother. So when a child shows dysfunction, that means he or she is not able to do something that he is supposed to do. Example, even play for that matter, that is a sign of a disorder. And that's different from the normal phasic separation anxiety that all of us can go through.
Okay. And when kids need some sort of support or therapy, the way you are saying, do you also think that even parents need some sort of support here?
Definitely. We say at our clinic, ICGC, we are a child guidance clinic, and I say I'm a child psychiatrist. But yes, most of my time goes in talking to parents because most of the behavior at home or the child's behavior is molded by the parents. The environment plays a very, very big role in a child's illness, especially. So no treatment is complete without the involvement of the parent, without the parent first understanding. So more than treating, it's about psychoeducation. So that means informing or discussing with the parent as to what the child is going through, what are the difficulties that he or she is facing, what is this disorder named as, what is the treatment options, what would be the outcome, etc. So all this forms a very, very important part of therapy. Say a child or a teenager is undergoing depression or anxiety. We do all the work with the child or the teenager. They are very amenable to therapy, so they do very well. But if the environment around him or her doesn't change, there is still a lot of nagging, a lot of pressure, then very unlikely that the child will get better. Okay. So it's always collaborative work with the parents also. On the other hand, even sometimes with the school teachers, because most of the time the child spends time in the school. Right? Yeah. I remember still, one of our first few mentors used to be our school teachers. We look up to them, we listen to them much more than we used to listen to our parents also at times. So even a school teacher can be a great help in aiding with us to help a child that is going through a psychological illness.
Okay. And doctor, what's your experience with the parents? To what extent you feel the parents take all these things positively?
That's a way.
I have actually seen, people feeling that, they are feeling little low, they are feeling little embarrassed to experience or expect or even accept things that, yes, my child is going through this.
It's a very
what
valid question, and yes, no one right answer for this. What I can say over the last 10 years that I've been practicing child psychiatry, the awareness is definitely getting better. 10 years ago, if I had to tell a parent that your child is undergoing depression or anxiety, I'd get the most weirdest reaction, and parents just wouldn't accept it. Today, parents are definitely much more accepting, much more aware, much more, aware and accepting of that my child is going through something. I have to help my child. So definitely the awareness has gone up. But still, we struggle with parents who may have unrealistic expectation or a lot of self-blame, guilt. So sometimes when we, disclose the diagnosis and we say, so example, this child has autism spectrum disorder, there is so much conflict between the parents. It starts from it's come from your family or your
My
family
family,
to the point of, you did not parent my child right. So we've actually seen parents separating also, going through a lot of difficulty during that period. And sometimes mothers especially go into a lot of guilt to the point of pathological guilt that I did something that my child has
That's
an
why the-
illness today.
Oh.
So first removing those negative emotions, those pathological emotions and making them realize that sometimes these are biological. Nothing that the parent did or did not do caused the autism or the ADHD, but it was a biological vulnerability of that child's brain to, develop autism. You can't really blame the parent. But after the diagnosis, how you accept it and then how you parent the child will go a long way in the outcome.
To what extent genes play a role in these disorders?
A lot of role. Genes are very, very important, and genetics, a lot of psychiatric disorders, neurodevelopmental disorders are pretty genetic in nature. So we do ask these questions in our routine history, but it's not only genes. So we say all our disorders are biopsychosocial. So biological is the genes that we get from our parents, which may not carry a disorder gene. But there is the psychological component, which is the child's own temperament. A child may be more vulnerable to developing depression because he or she doesn't have the best coping mechanism. A child may, grow up in the worst possible environment, adversity, but still be very, very resilient. So that's the child psychology. That's something we work on. We develop those coping skills. And the third part is the social environment. That means every day, what kind of an environment he or she is growing up in. May have the best environment at home, but may be subjected to a lot of trauma in the school. Say example,
Maybe
bullying.
bullying,
Yes. Or everything is fine in the school, but the parents are having a discord at home. So again, to a large extent, it's biopsychosocial. We can't change biology, definitely. Social, to a certain extent, we can work on. But what we try and work on is the psychology. That means the child's coping mechanism.
Okay. And doctor, coming to kids below 10, okay, we will definitely discuss teenagers and their issues separately. But when it comes to kids below 10, have you come across any particular case which totally changed the way you look at child psychology, or you took it up as a challenge?
So I would say every case teaches us a lot, and all that I've read in my psychiatry textbooks or during my post-graduation definitely wasn't enough. Every case that we see in the clinic is a different case, and we have to, really talk and understand that disorder because children have different emotions. So, any disorder, no two children have the same symptoms or the same, but I remember in the initial few years when you're just trying,
Yeah.
so definitely, I mean, young children, especially when they are suffering from anxiety or depression, or
What
a
was
young
that
child,
age?
say 8-year-old child came with, self-harm, like, harmed himself. So you know that children also harm themselves, right? And didn't understand why he was harming, just frustrated with life, just very fed up because was facing some adversity in school, difficulty in the sense of bullying at school, and couldn't take it. Not every child, and couldn't open up to parents. And whenever he tried to open up to the parents would say, you have to be brave, you have to put through it. We've also faced bullying. This will only make you stronger, etc. But the child wasn't able to cope. So one fine day, the child got very upset and said, I should do something to myself. Obviously, at 8-year-old, he didn't even understand. So he just tried hurting himself with a knife. And that's when the parents took it very seriously and came. And that's when, I realized that children can have very, very intense emotions. So even if
literally tried slitting his-
Yes. And without that intention, just so
Yeah.
helpless at that point of time and without an intention of dying per se. But sometimes emotions of children children can be so vulnerable. Children are impulsive. Children cannot process things. The child was having a bad day, and the last thing he needed to hear from the parent was, move it and let's just forget it and move on, because the child
Nobody
wanted to be
accepting
heard.
his emotions
Exactly. So that's,
as valid.
some of these cases obviously have, stuck with me, and that makes our resolution to work with children and adolescents probably even more strong.
So how did this child, I am just curious to know, how did this child
So luckily
go
after
through
that, the
this?
parents came around. The parents accepted it. The parents felt very guilty. They went through that entire cycle of guilt, blaming each other. The mom left her job to be with the child for some time, etc. We spoke to the school. A lot of things were done. Changes were made in the child's life. And luckily, the child got help. The child is now doing much better in life.
Wow, that's so amazing. So now asking this question as a parent, if a child is showing any signs of anxiety, any signs of depression, or the way you're talking about self-harm, what is the first step a parent should take?
First, I would say parents have to recognize the signs, right? I mean, they have to understand that this is a sign. So if your child, like I said, is not sleeping properly, is not eating properly, is spending too much time by himself, is not engaging in the hobbies he or she likes. So typically your child likes football, swimming, or dance, art, and nowadays he or she is not doing that at all, is just, being in their room. The academic grades are dropping, is he or she is spending excess time on the phone, not wanting to meet their own friends, is appearing very tired, very gloomy, or having repeated, say, headache, stomach ache, etc. These are some signs of psychological illnesses. So in these cases, first important to accept, yes, my child may be going through something. A lot of times children actually speak to their parents. They tell them that this is what I'm feeling, but parents obviously unintentionally do not accept it or shun it away. So listening to your child, especially when your child is talking about his or her emotions, is very important. So first, listen without judging. Listening without judging is not something that we all are very good at, but important not to judge, not to immediately give your own advice. You should have done this. So your child
Sometimes
comes and
we
tells
don't
you.
want to hear any advice. We just want someone to hear. And kids are no different.
And especially children,
Yes,
they don't want advice.
Yeah.
Your child comes and tells you, I fought with my best friend. She said like this to me. And you immediately say, okay, don't talk to that friend. But she's just sharing what
Yeah,
happened. So just
exactly.
listening without judging and giving them that space, giving them that confidence that I'm always there for you. And if needed, we take help. Then maybe you could talk to the school teachers, maybe talk to your kids' friends to find out how he or she have been in class. And then if necessary, of course, take help. And always better, if you're in doubt, always speak to a professional, because they will probably guide you the best and then make you understand whether he or she needs help or not.
Doctor, also sometimes have you come across such kind of cases or kids where kids are facing problems because they are overprotected by parents?
Yes. We call it helicopter parenting. You
Yes,
remember
and
there was
what
a
are-
very nice
exactly.
movie on that by.
So what are the issues that these kids face, and how do you as a doctor you get them out of it?
So this is typical helicopter parenting, and Kajol had a movie some years back
Yeah.
called Helicopter Ila, very nicely explained. And this is a style of parenting that has been studied. No bad intention. The parent
Yeah.
just wants to be there for a child. We all want to be there for our children. But going to a point where you don't want your child to suffer from anything. So going to the point, kal, school mein chillayenge teachers, so I'll do the child's homework. I'll pack the child's bag. I'll do everything for my child so that my child doesn't face any stress. Initial years, yes, when they are independent, we need to do more for them. What happens because of this style of parenting is children don't develop resilience. They don't develop coping skills. Your parents are always there for you, but it's okay for children to struggle. It's okay for children to sometimes get a little shouting from their teachers, etc., especially if they were at fault. So helicopter parenting only makes a child very dependent on the parents, and their own critical thinking, what should I do if I
Emotional
have a problem,
intelligence,
will
yeah.
not develop.
Yeah.
Sometimes we see teenagers, you're supposed to be independent. You can go and travel by yourself, but all the time there is a chauffeur driven car for you. You're never allowed to go alone. Tomorrow you suddenly land up in a place alone. The child doesn't know what to do in that kind of a situation.
Very true.
So that's why at an age appropriate time, making them independent and letting them go through struggles is very important.
Now, doctor, coming to our teenagers, okay, what are the most common emotional issues that you have come across among them?
Yeah. Teenagers, I think, face too much struggle. And I keep thinking to myself, I think when I was a teenager, definitely the stress wasn't this high. You know, you talk to teenagers, genuinely, there is so much stress. There is so
Very
much competition. There is so much pressure. They want to do everything. Like in our times, okay, you were studying, you do only studies, you know, but now they want to be the best in extracurriculars. They want to be best in studies. They want to be best in social skills. They don't want to be, missing out on anything. They want to be available online, etc. So there is just too much pressure. A lot of disorders begin in teenage years. So, in statistics wise, we say 50% of adult psychiatric illnesses begin before the age of 14. So, a lot of these disorders begin in adolescence, in 13, 14, when they're just developing puberty and, adolescence is setting in. Depression, anxiety are extremely common in teenagers, especially today. And often they are overlooked, saying that he's just being moody, he or she is just being a teenager, but
Yeah,
it
because
may
they
be more than that.
Don't like to connect the way they used to connect. Like I'm saying, as a
Parent.
mother of a teenager, the way my child was 2 years back and the way he is today, there is I feel he's a different human altogether.
Definitely.
So sometimes I keep thinking that is he doing okay, or it's just that he wants space.
Yes.
Like a child who wanted to share everything with you suddenly says that, Mama, no, I don't wish to share everything. Everyday school, same to hota hai. And I'm like, now, that's not just anxiety from their side. We also start feeling anxious that, am I doing everything right as a parent? So the way you said that mom guilt,
Yes.
goes really, really high among teenage
Definitely.
kids' moms as well.
Yeah.
Do you also come across the
Yes,
same?
definitely. And I obviously teenagers need their space. They
Yeah,
need their
they
privacy.
Need too much space.
They need to be left alone at times. But trust me, teenagers will reach out to parents when they
Yeah.
need that help. So, what a teenager should understand is my parents are there for me. So, right now, I don't want them around me all the time, but they are there. So, mentally, the child should be confident that my parent is there. If I have a difficulty or any problem, I can always reach out to my parent or to my mother or to my father and openly speak to them. That's the kind of confidence that we need to build, that we are not physically around you all the time, but anytime you need us, we will be there and we will listen to you.
And now, doctor, what according to you, what is your observation when it comes to, the biggest and the most common mistake we parents are doing without having any wrong intentions, but those behavioral patterns are actually worsening issues in kids?
So you mean common parenting mistakes?
Yeah.
So I think one that I mentioned before is also not acknowledging, not
acknowledging,
listening to your children. Second, I think would be our own habits, especially when it comes to our own screen time. I get a
yes.
lot of teenagers today who come and, when I just generally, when I'm trying to strike a conversation with them, one of the first few questions I ask them is, if you could change something about yourself, what would it be? And if you could change something about your parents, what would it
And
be?
they say-
That's to strike a conversation. Most teenagers would tell me, I would want my mom or my dad to put down the phone or put down the laptop and talk to me. And this is something even a 6-year-old can tell, because I have a 6-year-old at home. And I know that, even though I'm definitely much more mindful when it comes, but there are times when even my son tells me, Mama, now you've come home, you put your phone away and you talk to me. He's only 6. So definitely children notice, however important that call or message may be, for them, you have just come home and you need to be with them. You need to listen to them about their day, etc. So modeling good behavior, especially our own screen time, managing our own emotions. So I had a teenager who told me, my father keeps telling me I am very angry and I shouldn't shout and I shouldn't be aggressive. So I said, yeah, because that's what your father and mother expect from you. Then why does he do that all the time? My father is always shouting and screaming at home. I see
are
him
always watching
shouting
you.
and raising his voice. So obviously that's modeling behavior. You can't teach something to your child what you are not practicing, and children pick it up even if you
They're
have a
always
small
observing
child
you.
or a teenager. So I think some of the parenting mistakes are, we don't do what we expect them to do. So, eat healthy meals, eat in time, clear your plate, clear your room. I think it all begins from us, because when we start doing it, that's when our child picks up these things and start doing. They learn more by modeling rather than by listening to us.
That's amazing. And now, doctor, coming to a very peculiar question or the issue among teenagers, especially those teenagers who are not at all studious. I'm definitely talking about my own son.
He'd be quite upset if he hears this.
Exactly. I hope he doesn't. But that's the everyday problem or issue I face. He's very brilliant. He he has amazing sense of clarity, but he's also very clear that I don't enjoy studies. Okay, I enjoy music. I want to do my career in music. So if I'm going to do it in music, why should I take so much efforts in studies? So as a grown up, even though I understand whatever he's saying is right, how do I make or how do I create the balance between no education is also important, grades are important when you are studying, especially in school, but what you are saying is also right. How do I balance these two things?
So very nicely, you said my child is intelligent, though he doesn't like studies. So you're definitely not viewing his intelligence only in the form of his marks.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's something that we want parents to understand. It's called multiple intelligence. Your child may not only, be good in studies, but there is something called as emotional intelligence. There's something called as, social intelligence. So we say visual learners, kinesthetic learners, etc. So even cricketers who are really intelligent may not have been very good in studies.
very
Actors
true.
who are intelligent in their own field may not be the best of students when they were younger. So intelligence is in different ways, but I completely relate to the fact that you do want your child to study.
Exactly.
But yes, today's world luckily doesn't only recognize academic strength as the only form of intelligence. So we say IQ, which is basically your ability to get your grades, is very important, and initially all the research was done on how to improve IQ. But now we say, and we believe, and so much study has been done, that IQ is only important to get you into college. But what makes you successful in life is your emotional quotient and your social quotient. If you remember your batch, if I remember my school batch, is it necessary that only the most intelligent ones are doing very well?
Absolutely.
In fact, the ones who are doing really well were
Exactly.
the ones who were not very great at studies, managed, but were very good at social skills. So
true.
EQ and SQ is a more important form of intelligence. And luckily, the difference is IQ is something that we are born with and we are kind of gifted with. Some therapies can, sharpen it, but we can't really improve IQ. But your EQ and SQ is something that changes throughout your life. With your
You can build it up.
experiences, we
Yeah.
can build it up. Somebody who is not good socially can develop some social skills as he or she grows also. So in the end, it's his SQ, his ability to relate to people, that is going to make him more successful. And you already said he has some strengths. But I understand we need to complete, basic schooling, basic graduation, etc. So while we keep telling the child, you develop all those strengths, because a lot of people may be good at studies, very few people will be good at sports, arts, etc. So you develop that. But yes, encourage him to at least get through his basic level of studying, at least to the extent possible for him. So if he gets his time to do his cricket and to do his art, I'm sure that 2 hours of study, because he's intelligent, he can get away with 2 hours of studying and still do decently well. So we have to stop looking at, of course, only grades, but look at overall achievement of the child and what the child is good in, understanding what your child is good in and actually harnessing that skill.
Wow. That gives so much comfort. Realizing that I'm not exactly wrong. He's also not wrong, but we have to meet
Balance.
somewhere in middle. Yes. So, Doctor, now the next question is, how should parents talk to children about failure? We all have experienced it. We all have understood that failures are the biggest way of coming out of that particular problem and creating success. Actually, for me, I have always said that my biggest teachers were my mistakes and my failures. But how do we make our kids realize that it's okay to fail and then, come out of it?
And especially you see today's kids, they don't want to fail. I mean, we were
Exactly.
okay. They don't want to fail.
Yes.
They're very competitive. So I think it begins in early childhood only, when, the way we spend time with our kids when they're very young children is through board games. Remember, we used to play snakes and ladders or play chess or play, competitive board games. And where the child loses, you see that frustration building up, etc. So we say playing board games teaches kids a lot of things. For us, it's just 10 minutes of snakes and ladders. But that child develops that tolerance, frustration tolerance is building up. He understands that, he'll go up, he'll come down again. So simple things, finding time in your daily life, not just sitting, I'm taking a chapter, I'm taking a class for you today on dealing with failure, but finding those moments in life, sharing your own failures. I think children, like I said about modeling, when I was younger, this happened and I didn't do well, I failed, but then I decided to work harder and I decided to come up in life, etc. So children want to see, they definitely see you as a successful mom. Your son sees that. But he should also know the story behind it. Like what made you so successful? What were the hardships you went through when you were a child? So that he understands that even if I go through a hardship today, it's okay. I will, be successful later on in life.
You are making so much sense right now, doctor, because my son has seen me at my rock bottom. Okay, where there was a point where my son did not want to talk to me because I was so irritable, frustrated with my own life. Then he has seen me working on myself, where my family members used to make fun of me. What are you doing waking up at 4 o'clock? What exactly are you that to do during COVID when the whole world is staying up throughout the night? You're waking up at 4. So he has seen that phase and now he has seen this phase. So probably what you're saying is actually making sense to me, because today he, at this age only, he wants to start doing something that he's discussed in the morning. I want to ask this question also. What if teenagers also want to start earnings? They have this inclination towards earning, starting business. To what extent we as parents should support it, keeping in mind their as it is not very much interested in studies?
Definitely, it's a double-edged sword. I would say
Exactly.
you're developing an entrepreneur. Definitely, you say
Yes.
start early. But I would say when he's already not so much into studies, and you can make quick money with some of these things, say share
Yeah.
market, or even playing video games, making
He has
reels
started
videos.
asking about trading and all. I'm like, what do you know
But
about it?
he's only 13, you said,
Exactly.
right? So their brains are not fully developed yet. So when I spoke about the first 5 years, that's 90% of brain development. The rest 10% happens throughout the childhood. So till 18 or 20, this part of our brain, which is called the prefrontal cortex, which is the brake system. Like, it tells us not to do this because this is wrong. So that's the brake system of our brain that doesn't develop till 18 or 20 years in life. That's why you'll see 13 to 18-year-olds, they're very impulsive.
Very
They're trying other
impulsive,
things.
yes.
They're, novelty seeking. Today they want to try this, tomorrow they want to try this. They obviously go through the phase of bad experimenting, etc., because they don't have that fully developed brain yet. They are not cognitively that developed. Which is why also the legal limit for driving, drinking, even marriage example is all after 20 years of age, 21, pushing it even further, because yes, biologically the brain hasn't developed till then. So giving money, and in that sense to earn money at 13 to 18 can of course be very dangerous, because once he realizes I can make money, he will just get more and more consumed into it. And the way the stock market, or example video games are developed, I lost 100 rupees,
it's
now I'll
such a
put
huge
50
game
more
today.
exactly, so I'll get 500. He doesn't know where to stop. I had a case recently who lost a lump sum. I wouldn't even tell the amount of money, just because he started playing. He had access to his parents' GPay, and then, just went on. And then he developed guilt. I'm losing my parents' money. Let me make up. And he was very confident. Now, next round, I will win. So, in that sense, it ended up that he lost more and more money, and lost a huge amount of money in that regard. So, definitely, it can be very, very dangerous to just give it. So, if you're doing it, of course, supervised. I mean, the child has you around, you are the father around, and then you're doing it, it's okay.
Okay. So coming to the the child that you're talking about, do you think that the child was addicted to playing video games?
Not even addicted. It was just one
guilt.
try. I mean, and he went on and on over one night, just playing, putting money. It was at night that probably the parents didn't even notice the messages from their phone that the money is being debited. And then he had so much guilt the next morning. He woke up the parents saying, I only wanted to save your money. But in that process, lost a huge amount of money.
And the parents took him to you because they wanted to know what exactly.
He had no addiction and absolutely no diagnosable disorder, but it was just, the impulsivity and getting so consumed in the video game.
So you just had to work on, I am just asking out of curiosity, you just had to work on, he feeling that guilt and taking wrong decisions.
Yes, and also with the parents, that we can't just give things to a 13-year-old. It's okay to be free with your children. You're okay with sharing passwords and okay with, keeping money all around the house, or, giving them access. But sometimes you don't know what their mind will trick them into.
Exactly.
So always having that supervision, not, daunting over them all the time like a hawk, but keeping some supervision on your children is very important.
That opens up so many things in my mind, because these are the exact questions we teenagers parents go through every single day. Like every day feels like sometimes, a battle.
Yes.
Like whether he will wake up with happy mood, sad mood, I don't want to go
You're
to
walking
school.
on eggshells.
Exactly. Every day is a different day, and this is giving so much clarity. I'm sure everyone who's listening to us right now would be so much at ease after listening to whatever you're saying, doctor. So now coming to working mothers or working parents or single parents, what are the common issues that you have come across, and how do you deal with these kids differently?
You're a working mother. I'm a working mother. We get barely 2 hours in the morning, which is only about rush getting him ready for school, and the late 2 hours at night where you have to get his homework completed, get him ready in the next day, etc. So there is very little time, but it's about quality time. The amount, like I told you, the child tells us not to use the phone, etc. So that undistracted, undivided little bit of attention that you can give and the time that you can give to your child. Working parents, working mothers especially, and single mothers have a lot of guilt. So sometimes because of this guilt, they get into this overcompensation mode. Weekend parenting. Monday to Friday, Monday to Saturday, I have no time for my child. So Sunday, I want to fulfill every wish of his. And because I can financially do it, then go to the point of, buying everything, taking him out every weekend, etc.
I feel you're talking about me. Yes, please go on, doctor.
So obviously you can't overcompensate. You can't compensate for the time that you've lost out on the weekday. Yes, you can go for a picnic, spend quality time, but it doesn't always mean buying things. That's
yes.
the trap we all get into. Children will ask for it. Okay, I've not got you. Let's go out. Let's go to a gaming parlor, this, that. But every weekend shouldn't be only about spending money, because then the child will lose the value of that thing also. Anything in excess is not good. So of course, not overcompensating during the week, wherever possible, how much ever time you have, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, making it count by giving undivided. I have parents who are stay-at-home mothers, and when I talk to their children, sometimes the child will say, but my mother doesn't give me any time, and then I think to myself, but the mother is a working mother. So then I don't ask the child, but then I ask the parent, how are you spending time with the child? Even working mothers do have a lot of work at home. You can't take them for granted. So even though they are at home, they're so much into the housework or other chores or everything else, it ends up with them spending only 1 or 2 hours of quality time. So it's not about quantity, it's about the quality of time and how you spend time with them and how you make them, realize these small values of life in that limited time that you have.
And is there any pattern that you have seen among kids who have working parents, especially working mother or single parents? Is there any typical pattern that these are the issues that are very common among single parents?
So I can't generalize more than the issues. I can say to a large extent, they're definitely a little more independent because they've been doing things by themselves. They have to do their house chores by themselves, etc. Or they value that little time that they get with the parent also. If I talk about issues, then maybe, yes, sometimes they wanted to speak to their parent, but the time wasn't there. So they don't have enough time and space to speak to their parents or to play with them, etc. For example, or they don't have their parents taking them. Sometimes you hear children saying, okay, everybody is coming. My child has said this to me at many a times, everybody drops me, but you are not dropping me or picking me up, especially. I still manage to drop, but not picking me up from school, but others, kids' parents are coming. So they feel bad about these things. So wherever possible, where you can make these small things, even in your busy life, that I think goes a long way for the child.
And doctor, nowadays, do you also see loneliness among kids is growing?
Definitely. I would say it's growing in adults, definitely.
Yeah, definitely in adults. And that's the reason when an adult is a lonely parent, obviously it is somewhere going to reflect in the child as well.
Yes. So you ask a child today, how many friends do you have? And the child says, 1,000 plus. And then you say, okay, what games do you play? He says, I'm playing football. This is a child that I'm conversing with. And he says, I'm playing football. And he's very obese. And so I just ask him, you do play football 3-4 hours a day. And then I realize he's talking about online friends and online football. So, but then I asked him, what about your friends whom you talk to on a daily basis? 1 or 2 maybe, but feeling very lonely, feeling very left out, feeling not accepted by everybody for whatever reason. So yes, so it's not about the number of friends online, but the real friends, which are definitely, lesser now in number. Yeah. So, because even if you notice in your building compound, if you go down or you look at a restaurant around you in the restaurant, when you see a family, etc., what's the most common sight? They're all on their phone.
Yeah, very true.
Kids are on the phone, the parents are on the phone. True. When you see teenagers in the building, they're all on the phone. They're down, but they're on the phone all the time. So, it should be very a rule that when you're going out.
My son literally says that I don't enjoy going out and having dinner. You order everything at home. I don't want to go out. He's very clear. Even on his birthdays and all, he's very clear that I don't understand what I'm supposed to talk. We can talk the same thing at home. Let's order in. Because, there we will be looking at each other. So these are so common things, like, and especially these teenagers, they are so on your face. You just don't realize sometimes how to react. Like, we are doing it for you, but I don't want it. That kind of.
But once I think they realize, I think even they take the effort. I've seen teenagers making pacts that, when we are together, we won't use the phone. When we come down to play, we won't carry our phones, because they also realize
Yeah.
it. So I think teenagers definitely, they realize sometimes, and they themselves, research or talk to people and see how, they should make changes in their lifestyle.
Wow. Very true, very true. It means that somewhere we parents need to discipline us more, so that, kids start getting disciplined without even disciplining them.
Definitely.
Right? So now, Doctor, coming to your, dream project, you call it ICGC. So I want to know more about it and what kind of ecosystem you are planning to build through it.
So I'd say ICGC is my first baby. My kid Mir always says, I'm the second child of Mama, because Mama has the first baby is her clinic, and he accepts that very willingly. So we, like I mentioned during my PG, we had a lot of, in my hospital, a lot of kids coming in, but it was a acute psychiatric adult hospital where you have obviously mentally ill patients walking around, parents not feeling safe, etc. So we thought children should have their own space. You can't open up in a doctor's came in, but the children should have that playroom kind of a thing. They should feel comfortable, because children's mode of language is play, not just conversations. So then, along with my director, Dr. Vishal Indla, who's my mentor, we decided to start this chain of child guidance clinics named ICGC, Indla's Child Guidance Clinic, where we thought like we should cater to both neurodevelopmental and psychological illness, all under one roof. So right from consultation to psychological testing to therapies, everything happens under one roof, where we're not only treating the children, but the entire family in general, hand holding them. Because, once a child is diagnosed with a psychiatric or a neurodevelopmental illness, it's a very long period. Then they are associated with us for a lot of years. So we see them, growing up literally at the clinic. So during this time, the parents are also very important, holding, like you said, the guilt of the parents, the depression or the anxiety that parents go through. Treating them also becomes an integral part when you're treating the child. So we wanted to create this safe space for children, teenagers and families who are suffering from these disorders, with breaking away the stigma that is associated with child psychiatry or with psychiatrists in general, and to give them that child friendly kind of an environment where they feel very comfortable, and we can bring out the best in every child that visits us.
So how many kids do you meet on an average every day?
So yeah, like I mentioned earlier, child psychiatric disorders have increased. The prevalence has gone up a lot, which is the sad part, definitely. But on the other hand, I would say at least they're coming for treatment. We can't prevent some of these disorders, but at least early diagnosis helps us a lot. So definitely at our clinic, because we have a big team, we have easily 20 to 30 kids coming in for therapies, consultation, minimum 20 to 30 kids coming in every day, whether it's consultation or testing or therapies, and they vary from 1.5 years old to 18 or 19 years old.
Okay. Now, coming to a very kind of serious question, teenage suicides, and suicidal thoughts. Have you also catered to these kids?
A lot, and they are
And
only
can you
increasing.
talk more about it?
It's definitely a topic that parents, really shy away from, to a point where parents tell me, do not ask my child whether he or she is suicidal, because, you're planting the seed in them. No, that's not the truth. When we are assessing a child for depression, we have to ask these questions, because we have to check whether the child has any intention, any thought, etc. So adolescents, because I said depression has risen and is only rising, definitely one of the signs of severe depression is having suicidal thoughts. It may not be that I am going to, jump from the 20th floor, but it may be a passive death wish, which is like, sometimes teenagers say, I wish I don't wake up tomorrow morning, or I wish a bus runs over me. I won't do anything to myself, but I wish, I would be dead.
Something would happen.
Yes, so that's at that base level. Then it could be self-harm thoughts. I'm so fed up of my problems. Sometime I mentioned in the case before, I'm so fed up. I just want some relief, and that harming him or her at that moment gives them some temporary relief, and then it becomes a habit. Or it could be an suicidal idea. I'm just battling, and the child is himself or herself scared of that suicidal idea because they realize, this could be dangerous, to a point of course, intent, and then planning, and actually attempt or even completed suicide. So that's the whole spectrum of suicidality in children, and it could be from any range that we see them, and at any range they do need help, whether it's a very mild thing, just an off thing that a child or a teenager has mentioned. And because of all the trauma that is happening, or even the bad news that they hear today, teenagers, if you talk to a teenager, and I had spoken recently to a young adult and asked him what is the thing that fears you the most, that makes you most anxious. You know what he said? He said, I don't want to grow up only. I don't want to, like, I'm 20. I wish I just remained 20. I said, why? He said that, in 2 years, I'll be expected to work and earn. I said, yeah, that's a realistic expectation. Came from a very, very reputed college. So I asked him, so you would earn, right? He's like, do you know how AI is progressing? What guarantee that my job won't remain after 5 years, will remain after 5 years? AI is replacing every possible job. And for all you know, after 5 years, my job will be gone. I won't get married. I won't have kids. I said, why? I mean, is there any trauma related to that? Do you think I can sustain in Mumbai buying a 2 BHK, having 2 kids? Do you know the cost of schools? This was
Oh
a
my God.
20-year-old. And the kind of questions that he asked, sometimes I also didn't have answers because these are very realistic worries,
questions.
And he has seen some of his seniors from his college were in very good companies. They lost their jobs because of layovers that are happening for various reasons, obviously. So there are genuine concerns that a young adult or a late teenager faces today. Say, if I don't get 98 or 99, I'm not going to get admission. I'm an average student. I won't get admission in a college, because obviously, the way the percentages are going are very, very high. So there are very genuine things. And if a child is resilient, is strong, obviously, he can overcome, has the best family support. But if one of these things are missing, a child may be very vulnerable. And then he or she hears or thinks, there is no other option but to, end my life. So definitely suicide rates have increased. We have incidents of teenagers having completed, as in we have lost young lives. And every minute that we speak, a young life is lost due to suicide. And it's very, very common. It is the second most common reason now all over the world for deaths among teenagers and young adults after road traffic accidents. So RTA is considered the first common leading cause of death in teenagers, young adults. Second cause is suicide. And that's how all over the world, not just India, suicides are so common. So very important to keep a check on your teenager, especially their mental health. Sometimes they may write diaries, they may give subtle signs, giving away their belongings, not participating in any things anymore, writing a diary which you happen to read, etc. So, we must take these signs seriously and ensure that they get help at the earliest.
So this is from the point of view of parents. As a psychiatrist, what is the biggest red flag for you where you realize that, okay, this kid is not just frustrated, not just depressed, not just anxious, but is 100% suicidal.
So we
and he's
ask-
not actually, threatening
Yeah.
parents.
Very right. Of course, we have this whole spectrum of
Yeah.
teenagers who also threaten. Like they may have
Exactly.
personality disorder, so they get into threatening. But we do, when we have, we call it a mental status examination, where we are talking to them and finding out their psychopathology, their thoughts, their feelings, their behavior, maybe asking them some leading. In suicide cases, we ask leading questions. Do you have that? Then observing their behavior, checking with the parents the last 2 weeks, how he or she has been. And definitely we can pick up signs. And if we pick up signs and we speak to the teenager, invariably the teenager may accept it, will tell us about it. And that's when we know that, it's an emergency. It's a psychiatric emergency, as we call it, to the point where we may need hospitalization, definitely medication and intense support from everybody around the child.
Okay, but the kids can get saved.
Definitely. They
If
can
they
get
come at-
safe, they can get better, they can be treated from depression as well.
Okay, they can get completely they can live normal life. you mean
Yes,
to
with
say.
the right kind of help, support from the family also, they can definitely get better.
This gives so much relief to hear this. Doctor, just asking one question, that when parents come across these kind of unfortunate events, you get to hear something happening. Like in my complex where I stay, in just last 3 months, we have come across 2 teenage suicides. Okay, our first thought was, my child should not come to know. Like we tried our best that he shouldn't even come to know only, because that, he knew the one of the kids. Okay, just 2 years elder to him. And it was very, very, very upsetting, very difficult time for parents also, just to keep things away from the kids. So what is the kind of emotional work according to you parents should do, or to safeguard? Because in these cases obviously our first thought is not letting them know only all these things.
So that's the first mistake that we make, because
Yeah,
you
this
think
is
you
what
can,
exactly.
you can,
So
protect
what
your
exactly
child,
do
but
we
your
need?
child is exposed, everywhere. You may not tell him, he or she may know from the internet,
Yes.
from his friends, and it's so much better that you speak to your child than him getting to know from somebody else, because that will be a bigger shock for him.
Exactly.
So first, yes, when something very unfortunate like this happens, it's very, very difficult for teenagers, and we say
First, you
copycat
take some
suicides
time.
happen.
Exactly.
Yes, as
Exactly.
in, yes.
That happened,
So a
copycat
lot of
suicide
suicides
only.
happen after that. A
Like
couple of
same
years
floor.
ago, if you remember, during COVID,
Yeah.
a famous film star, committed suicide,
Yeah.
and then this rate had gone up a
Yes,
lot.
yes, yes.
So again, in this case, yes, important to sit down your child. Talk to your child that this happened, and then share what you feel about it, how bad you are feeling, about it, and then help your child to open up about what he or she is feeling. We can't push, because at the first instance the child is not going to share, but at that moment, assuring the child that you are always there for your child, it's okay for him to feel sad in this process, because he is going to feel sad. So it's okay if you're feeling sad, feeling helpless, feeling guilty. Children develop guilt. I should have done something to protect my child,
Yes,
my
yeah, my
friend.
friend.
Yeah,
Yes,
I could
very
have done
true.
something, I could have prevented this from happening. So speaking to your child about these common emotions, asking him or her if they're comfortable sharing it with you, or whether they want to share it with somebody, it may be a teacher, a school counselor, or a psychiatrist, or a mental health professional, because children do open up, and sometimes they need to speak to a mental health professional in the aftermath of something as serious as this.
Yeah.
And then making sure that your child is there. I mean, your child
Emotionally
is safe. Of
secured.
course, in some instances, taking
Yeah.
extra precaution will help a lot.
Yeah, you were talking about schools, map. I definitely want to know what is your take on school also taking initiative to create awareness, and what according to you is happening right now in India?
I would say it's definitely much better. At least we're
Yeah.
blessed. We're in Mumbai. I think almost every school has a
Yeah.
counselor now, which is great. It should be mandatory, not an option anymore. But it can't be one counselor for the entire school. The number of counselors have to be, increased. They have to be trained well enough. Teachers have to be trained well enough in understanding, identifying emotional disorders, neurodevelopmental disorders, because generally they will be the first point of contact. The child will go to a school teacher and open up, because that's the bond that they share with their teachers. So school teachers and counselors can help a lot. So a lot of schools today are conducting, we do from our clinic or other, they are conducting by themselves also workshops on topics like, right from the early years, good touch, bad touch, body safety, how to say no, how to understand abuse, etc., to the older kids as to what are emotions, and what is depression, what is anxiety. It's important to speak. The problem still is sometimes we don't want to speak about depression, we don't want to speak about anxiety, because no, this can't happen to our child. No, none of us are immune to it. It can hit anybody at any age. So it's so important to be aware of it and to speak about it, because in mental health, the more conversations that we have, like this one, for example, that's definitely at least helping one person out there. And awareness is the only thing that will help in mental health conditions.
Very, very true. Doctor, now coming to our last question here. You see, unfortunately, all these incidents of problems, issues happening among kids are definitely on rise. What, according to you, you have this thought in your mind, or probably a way of looking forward and managing these things as a child psychiatrist?
So I would say, like I said, awareness helps. The more we try to make people aware, we go to community. So it's not just sitting in the clinic, but going to community, speaking, sparking mental health conversation, speaking to parents, speaking to teachers, counselors, helping them to understand, speaking to pediatricians, because sometimes they may be the first point of contact. And yes, acknowledging that mental health conditions do happen and are very common in children and adolescents, and they need the same amount of care. If your child was suffering suffering from a physical illness, immediately parents would do whatever they could, take him to the best doctor, do all the investigations, do all even the medication when needed. But unfortunately, when it comes to mental health, the whole stigma, why go to a psychiatrist, why take psychiatric medication? So it's important that we acknowledge that mental health is, if
As
not only,
important,
but
yeah.
more, definitely as important than
Sometimes
physical
even
health.
more important.
Definitely.
Because many times all your emotions are only playing role and they are getting manifested in your physical health.
Definitely.
Like the way you were saying, kids having
Headache,
stomach
stomachache.
issues, and this starts with your emotions only, right?
Yes.
So the way you are saying that, it is definitely even more important than physical health.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Doctor, amazing discussion today. And if I have to talk about my own takeaway as a parent, not just as a host to this podcast, acceptance, is what I have understood. And I'm sure I'm going to take this back and going to think so much about how to accept these things, because the way I said and the way I accepted in this podcast itself that mom guilt is real, compensating over weekend is real. So these are so many things even we have to work on. I have to work on. So thank you so much for showing the real picture of what we all parents need to do so that kids become emotionally matured adults tomorrow. So now, before we leave, I have a rapid fire.
Oh, so you're going to take my Viva?
Yes, no,
I
not
thought I was
exactly
done
that.
when I did my PG.
No, it's gonna be amazing. You're gonna love it. One thing schools should teach but are not teaching currently.
Emotional management, stress management. A lot of schools are teaching, but very, very important to talk about emotions in schools. Building resilience.
Wow. Okay. Biggest myth about child psychology.
That mental health conditions don't happen in children, or mental health conditions go away on their own. A child can outgrow a psychological illness.
A parenting style that does more harm than good.
We spoke about it. Helicopter parenting. I think being overprotective of your child. Right intention, but wrong way.
Wrong way. Okay. An emotion you struggled while growing up as a child.
Maybe lack of confidence, feeling I'm not the best. I was not the best at studies, maybe, good but not the best. Okay in sports, nothing exceptional. So, really figuring out through my teen years, will I just be an average person or will I ever excel in something?
Okay. If I erase everything you have done till now and you have just 30 seconds to share one truth with the world, what would you say about yourself?
About myself. I would like people to remember about the kind of work that I have done, especially the kind of lives that we have helped at our clinic. And yeah, maybe just being a good person. I think that's the most important in the end.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manjari. This was amazing and something which will always and always stay with all of us, including me and all the listeners. So thank you so much for gracing this podcast.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.